It's the first time the Tokyo International Conference on African Development is taking place on the African continent since its inception in 1993. Aimed at promoting high-level dialogue between African leaders and development partners, the 6th edition is themed Advancing Africa's Development Agenda with TICAD Partnership and Promotion. The event is currently ongoing at the Kenyatta International Convention Center at the heart of the nation's capital, Nairobi. I'm Onye Sunday, and you're watching highlights from the 6th Tokyo International Conference on African Development. It's the first for the continent and an honor for Kenya as the first African host. With about 3,000 participants from the Japanese private sector present, the business of the conference is set in motion.
During the TICAD meetings that are going to be held here this weekend, we look to a candid exchange of insights about the present situation on the continent and a shared sense of fervor for the future of Africa. Indeed, the energy and dynamism, commitment that we have all brought to this conference, our shared resolve to solve some of the complex and enduring challenges facing the continent, is without a doubt extremely refreshing.
As the private sector, we are indeed very pleased that TICAD is being held here in Africa for the very first time, signaling the continent's full ownership of the process. We're also extremely encouraged by the focus and indeed the centrality that the private sector has been put into for this conference. We are looking forward to great deliberations, but more importantly, to the way forward thereafter. Africa has got many problems, many challenges, but Africa is also, as we heard earlier today, the place with the greatest opportunities. Hopefully, through this dialogue, we'll be able to put the two together and change the challenges and the problems to one of the opportunities, but more importantly, how we are going to actualize those opportunities.
Around 3,000 participants from Japanese private sector are here for TICAD 6. I am confident that the interest in Africa business will once again grow and the momentum behind investment will swell. For many years, we Japanese companies have focused on Africa's hidden potential, developing a business in the African countries as a partner for their economic growth. Moving forward, we will continue to collaborate with the Japanese government, JETRO, and other related agencies to help realize sustainable economic growth for Africa.
Fully in line with the development goals of the United Nations and the African Union, the 6th edition of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development looks to address industrialization, health and social stability, amongst other issues the continent faces.
Africa is still growing. If you look at the history of Africa from 2008 to 2013, during the height of the financial crisis, it was growing at over 5%. It was actually part of the part of the world that was boosting global growth when so many other places were faltering. But we know that there are still major hurdles. Africa needs an estimated $90 billion annually through 2020, more than double current investment, and far beyond what governments can finance through public procurement for infrastructure, just for infrastructure alone. And today, the private sector is playing a more limited role in closing infrastructure gaps in Africa than in any other region. So what's holding the private sector back? The major problem we hear is risk. Whether it's real or just a perception, the private sector is telling us that there's too much risk in the equation. And it means that investors have shied away from the kind of long-term investment required to build solid, quality infrastructure. We have to change both the perception and the reality. Governments have to do their part. They need to improve governance and regulations, uphold the rule of law, make the procurement process more competitive, and deliver better services.
For African economies to grow further, we must boost the performance of their private sectors. Aid is not enough. What Africa needs is investment. There is need for greater support for the small and medium-sized enterprises, especially in terms of access to affordable finance. That is why at the African Development Bank, we recently launched a $125 million Africa's Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Program that will provide African financial institutions with lines of credit of between $1 million to $10 million for small and medium-sized enterprises. Second, Africa must support its private sector to industrialize. No region of the world has developed without industrialization, and the reason is clear. Today, the size of the manufacturing sector has shrunk. It used to account for 25% of jobs in the mid-1990s, and this has contracted to 20% today.
In Africa, the private sector contributes 90% of employment, that's jobs, 70% of the GDP, and 70% of investments. That's how crucial it is for the private sector to be part and parcel of this transformation of the continent. This event coming to Kenya and to Africa for the first time since the inception of TICAD process in 1993 is significant in many ways. It is coming at a time when Africa is renewing and pushing forward on its development agenda. You have heard Madam Kariuki here say that the lions, tigers, and the rest are in this room. And so we welcome particularly the Japanese investors. We must say that the Japan investors are very shy in Africa. Well, whereas the products from Japan are very popular in Africa. And so you are coming here, and especially in the midst of the Prime Minister and main dignitaries, we hope the perception will change and that we will see more Japanese investment.
For many Africans here, holding the 6th Tokyo Conference on African Development demonstrates the growing African participation in the TICAD process.
I think it's wonderful for two reasons. There's a strong statement of intent from the Japanese government to help us develop our nation. TICAD moving from Tokyo to Nairobi is brilliant because that way we have more participation from Africans and more ideas being shared amongst Africans for us to actualize our development agenda.
First time that TICAD is held outside of Japan, and what we want to see is the 150 plus Japanese companies who have come to participate in this to really appreciate and get a feel for what Africa is like through participation in this program. A lot of them are now discovering a number of issues that has not been brought to their attention before in terms of returns that Africa can give investors, in terms of the market size and potential. Many were, struck when they heard that by the year 2050, the population of Africa would be more than India and China combined. That is a market that you can't afford to ignore. And obviously, many people always have a perceived view of risk on the continent of Africa. We want to see how that perception and reality can be breached through interaction with businesses that are operating here of Japanese origin, but also other multinationals and African businesses.
We do have challenges as a continent, and we do know very clearly that our biggest agenda has to be trade-driven and trade-focused. We've reached the stage where aid helped us in the 80s and the 90s, but now our agenda has to be very much trade-driven. so that it is win-win for both parties. Africa is extremely resource rich. We also have a very strong talent pool and a very young population. So we need to find synergies amongst our different cultures and continents so that we can both win.
The platform to enable this development was made available at the conference, which featured one of Japan's largest trade fairs. The side event featured 100 companies and organizations from the Japanese industry, government and academia, all in a bid to stir up and showcase opportunities in the country's technological space, geared to address some of Africa's infrastructure challenges.
This is a model of micro hydropower generating equipment. So this type of generator is from like 1 kilowatt to 200 kilowatts. So like this type of generator equipment can be applied for like small rivers or canals. So in Africa, I guess like this kind of system can be applied to like small villages or towns, so that like they can generate it by themselves.
This module clinic is aimed for healthcare service, development of the healthcare service in rural areas, because we identify that there are various demand in the remote areas who doesn't have access to the primary medical services. So we want to meet such demand by providing this kind of solutions. In this module, this is general consultation and diagnosis facilities, and this is obstetric delivery of the babies. So this is just a sample, and we can provide a dental clinic and others, of course, whatever needed.
The young at heart were also not left out.
We're a stationery manufacturer from Japan. We do ballpoint pens, mechanical pencils, markers, anything to do with writing and drawing, we do, basically. We have a setting today where we would like for our visitors to draw on our wall or color in and actually make our company president look interesting. I think it's a great opportunity for us to showcase our products to the African people generally. We already sell in Kenya, but the other countries were a bit shy, so we would like to get some exposure here.
Usually held every 5 years, the Tokyo International Trade on Africa is to be held every 3 years. There are signs Kenya will not be the only African country to host the conference in Africa. As African leaders and development partners deliberate on issues raised at the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, this event will surely go down in history as the first of many steps taken to rewrite Africa's development narrative.